Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. First hour is general discussion about anything we feel like talking about. Second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. Today, we're going to talk more about things that we're just interested in. Today, we had a special event planned for today. We're going to move it till next Wednesday due to some logistical issues that we need to sort out. So we'll have that next Wednesday, so stay tuned for that. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about the Belfast method. The team is coming in and giving us the lowdown of how this actually gets done. We produced an incredible event on last Saturday, and you can see it on YouTube on the YouTube channel. And really amazing, produced by, I don't know, 20 or 30 people. But the Belfast method specifically on how things, how the team has been doing remote takeovers is going to be covered tomorrow by the team. So come in for that for the second hour. Friday, we're going to be talking about shoestring production. So the other side of this, rather than doing it globally, how does one person or two people actually produce an event? And a lot of us started there, and some of us are still doing that. So we're going to talk through how we kind of approach that process. And then Saturday, I know that it's the 25th of December, but the education group still said they wanted to meet. so we're going to meet from 8 to 10 in the morning. We don't put that on YouTube, so you'll have to be here on Zoom to be part of that conversation. All right, and now we're going to jump into the questions, and Dennis is going to take over.
And our first question today comes from Juan C. Robles in Mexico. He says, rounded squares in Zoom Gallery, the latest update, any other features that are worth thinking about?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
They may not be features, they may be undocumented features, but on my Mac doing the update, other than those weird rounded corners, the naming convention that appears at the bottom says who's talking, toggles off automatically, at least on my system. So you have to go back into settings, go under video, thank you, TJ, and uncheck the box that is now requiring a check. It got unchecked.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was trying to figure out how to put rounded corners into our system for Office Hours 2.0, and now they've added it. So I guess that's the new thing, of course, is rounded corners. Everybody wants rounded corners. All right, next question.
The next question is from Guy Cochran in Seattle in the USA. Do you think CES will be a go?
Go ahead, John.
This is super interesting. I've been watching this for the last 30 days. Somebody in CES has been controlling this conversation in SEO and on Twitter. Not until this week have I seen a preponderance of people backing out of it, so it's not looking good right now.
Go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, I saw T-Mobile dropped out yesterday or this morning, so I don't think that's a good sign. And I have to tell you, if I still had a fairly significant expense, I've lost the sunk cost of the stand, but I would be saving the variable cost of the travel and the hotels if I could, because the supply chain is still biting.
Yeah, Rupert?
Yeah, I think the will it or won't it is still a kind of hot topic, but if you do stick to the facts, we can see that some vendors are announcing they're going to withdraw, and likely some others will too. It's obvious that not everyone who would have normally attended will attend. I mean, that's pretty much inevitable, and many vendors will have discovered new ways of interacting with their customers online. So if you put those things together, even if something does go ahead, it's going to look very different. And if I were attending, I'd just be considering whether or not that represented value for money in going, and I don't think it would.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Jeffrey.
So yesterday, CES came out with an email, and the email basically said things were going forward. What they're going to be doing is at the registration, you're going to be getting a test that you have to take, and that's plus your card. That's gonna tell you if you can get in or not. There are companies that are already heading into Vegas right now, especially anybody that's coming from overseas. They're also planning to do COVID tests when they go back to their original countries from there. So they're doing everything that's set to make this show go forward. And I think by canceling now, it would be just it wouldn't work for a lot of people. There'd be a lot of people that would be out of money and sitting in Vegas doing absolutely nothing.
I think that we saw the exact same thing happen though with NAB and IBC. We're doing it, and then the whole thing collapsed. So I think that we'll see. I think that a lot of that email may have actually precipitated some of the companies announcing they're not going, because I think that they wanted to make sure it was clear to their own users and people who are buying tickets that they're not going to be there. So I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't see another couple shoes drop between now and the end of the year. And if a couple more large brands drop out, it could implode. If it does go through, it's going to be a shadow of itself. I'm not sure if people really want it to go through the way it's about to go through, because you could end up with, the spike in COVID is dramatic. Like it is the most dramatic we've seen yet. So I think there's a pretty big challenge there. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, and you're seeing you're subject to international travel restrictions that multiple countries are now, because of this spike, are now instituting again. And so it may prevent a lot of manufacturers from actually coming in from overseas at the last minute.
And they have to fight the strong narrative that a lot of people believe that the CES 2 years ago was the original super spreader. So they're just going right back into it. They brought a lot of companies from all over the world right when things were hitting, and then suddenly everything exploded. So I'm not sure if people are that excited about, repeating that process. Next question.
The next question is from Ray Harwood in Avondale, Arizona. As a parliamentarian, think Robert's Rules of Order, not government or legislator, I'm interested in reading the Office Hours 501c3 governing documents, corporate charter, bylaws, rules and policies, etc. Is it membership based, and how will corporate meetings be held?
It's not membership based, and we're still putting all that stuff together. So we'll put it out as necessary. Next question.
The next question is from John Foltz in Selinsgrove in the US. Alex, how is the Monoprice HDMI matrix working out?
It's working out okay. I do have an ID problem. So there's a bunch of stuff that works. My Mac Minis the new M1 Mac Minis don't seem to like it direct in. So they're not showing up correctly. So I'm trying to figure that process out. And I'm wondering whether I have to have it routed before I plug them in so they see the monitor all the way through as it passes through. But right now they'll show up when they're plugged directly into a monitor, but not when they're going through the matrix. And I feel like they're not IDing it correctly. So I've had a little trouble with it. And so that it's not working perfectly. It seemed to work pretty well with lots of other inputs, just not the ones that I need. So right now it's sitting there as I kind of try to work through it. Next question.
Next question is from Bo Caudle in Charleston, South Carolina. I've acquired a Blackmagic Design Pocket 6K and a Prompter People Flex 24. What's the recommendation for a hi-hat type desk mount, wall mount, or tripod with a small footprint?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Sorry, it caught me by surprise. I was snoozing on the thing. That particular prompter has a flex arm that works great with. I'm not sure you can retrofit that, but it is part of the same prompter style. So I would think that a flex arm would be the way. The problem with a hi-hat is it's a big gadget. It's going to be sitting on your desk, and then the tripod goes on top of that. So you may have a little more issues with it. But I would go with a flex arm. That would be the way to go.
Go ahead, Noah.
So what I've done is I've separated my 24-inch prompter from my desk. So I have a little filing cabinet here and a piece of wood that I've built. So I custom built it instead of using a hi-hat. Hi-hat's a great idea, and I think you should do that. It's probably better than my setup. The thing that comes to mind, though, my recommendation would be to look at getting this kind of Z-plate type thing to go between your camera and the prompter sled or mount. The reason for that is the glass on the prompter can sometimes basically be too low of an angle, so it cuts off part of your screen. And if you're OCD like me and you really want to see the full screen, to have the ability to tilt the camera separate than the glass and the whole prompter, that could be helpful.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I'm using the Triad Orbit stand. So the nice thing about this is that you can, of course, wheel it around, but it also separates it from your desk, so you're not getting the shakes of your desk. But this thing's super robust. I know it doesn't look like much, but this base down here is super heavy. It's probably 20, 30 pounds. And then it's got different connectors that you can put. Otherwise, Triad Orbit makes some nice stuff that you can use to put on your wall. But the big thing is just separating it from your desk.
Go ahead, Jason.
I'm actually using the Z plate that they referred to just a few seconds ago, and I'm using a single clamp mount to the back of my desk for my camera. I don't have the prompter, but it's probably one of the things I'll add eventually to my kit. but that should really help you in balancing things out and getting the camera exactly where you need it for your eye line. So.
Yeah, one of the things we've done for low profile is definitely the triad orbits. As far as what we have sent out is the triad orbit, and it's super robust, and you don't think it can hold nearly as much as it actually can. The other thing that we've done with Twit, I know, and then we kind of copied them, was a heavy plate with a C-stand. We took the base out of the C-stand and actually welded it to the plate. And so we have like a round, think of like a 12 or 18 inch round base that was probably I think a half inch of metal. So it's very heavy, and then a C-stand coming straight up, and then we put a head on top of that C-stand and then dropped everything on top of that, and that became a relatively low profile solution. Go ahead, Courtney.
One consideration on that triad orbit is, since it's on wheels and it is the triad arrangement, it doesn't have angled legs. The legs come out horizontally at the bottom. If you have the legs sticking under your desk, be careful to arrange them so that you don't kick them, because if you kick that leg, it's going to mess up your whole shot and your view of the prompter and everything else. So.
And the triad, I think that those legs are, I don't know, maybe not that one, but the one that I use doesn't have wheels. It just goes straight. And the other thing about the tripod is that you can have it at an angle, or you can have them flat. So you have you have like 3 different indents of where you can set that lower tripod, and we use them a lot. The reason I even have them is because we use them with Ozos, because those little legs at the bottom are really easy to paint out or ignore in 360. Next question.
Our next question is from Douglas Carmichael. If you were taking conversations with Tony Mobley to an international, that's European or Asian audience, would subtitling or dubbing work best? Would you use burnt-in subtitles or embedded subtitles?
Go ahead, Jonas.
I think it kind of depends. I would probably add English subtitles, because that's the lowest hanging fruit to add more accessibility and a wider range of people. Then, of course, you would, the best thing you could do to make it more global is move it to a time frame where it's not 2 a.m. in the morning for Europe. That would help. And other than that, Europe and Asia are pretty good with English. We've been taught English from the starting first grade, so English is not really the issue anymore.
Go ahead, Laura.
You nailed it. I'm good.
And Sky?
Usually that question comes from the distributor, and how do they want to receive it in the traditional broadcast or filmmaking of a thing. So since you're doing it for yourself, it's what is your audience going to most connect with, and that would be further into your testing of what works best for your audience.
There's a couple things that we've done a lot of this. One of the problems with a discussion, obviously the easiest thing to do is captions or subtitles, because it's just easier to process. From when you're watching something, if you want to show something, the problem really with captions is people are just reading the bottom. Like if they don't know the language, their eyes are just in the bottom third of the screen the entire time. So dubbing becomes more useful if you want them to actually look at what you're actually talking about. If you're discussing it, it's one thing, but otherwise dubbing becomes more important. You just need to get good dubbing. And one thing people miss is really quality microphones and quality, processes in that sense, because a lot of people use a lot of dubbing, a lot of translation, especially if you're dealing with the UN6. You end up with a lot of UN style interpreters, and those interpreters are used to not very great hardware. So a lot of times we have to upgrade the hardware that they're using away from actually the stuff that is built for it, and into something that's more production ready, that's going to sound better in the dubbing process. And so those are some of the things that you just want to think about as you go down that path. One of the things that we've been experimenting with, or I've been playing with a little bit, is using When in 5.1, and you may see us experiment with this at some point. When in 5.1, using the surround speakers for the translator, so that we actually put the translation kind of over your shoulder. We were doing some stuff at the Vatican, and when the Pope sits there and talks, there's a person right over his shoulder speaking Spanish. And we were like, that's a really cool idea, and we could do that with surround. So we're thinking about using one of the surround speakers as the solution for that. We haven't really tested it enough, but you'll probably see some testing here as we move to 5.1 in 2022. Next question.
Our next question is from Bo Caudle in Charleston, South Carolina. What's a good stapler for stapling Cat 6 around the garage and attic?
Go ahead, Rupert.
maybe my personal preference, but I've never stapled data cable. You can fix like little hooks. So you can staple, like I've sometimes stapled cable ties to something and then created a loop, not draw it tight, but just create a little cable tie loop, every whatever, and then just loop your cable through like that, and then you can change it out. If anything goes wrong, you can add more. It's a bit more flexible.
David?
The Arrow T2025 is a U-shaped staple gun made for cables and wires. Not sure if I'd risk it with data cables for the points of your aim has to be dead on.
Alan?
Okay, and well, my first one was Rupert's one, which is one I did in my garage, which was using reusable cable ties, and we stapled those up so you could actually add to it. But my second one, which is one I've done in my loft, and you hopefully see this is an Arrow T59, which is for insulated staples, which are a type of staple that comes with a protective plastic sheath, basically, so it doesn't crimp or crush the cables. And these are used all over the place, and they are, certainly in the UK, they're up to fire regulations code as well, so they can be used for power cables and stuff as well. And I'm sure they're available over there as well.
That's great. Jeffrey?
And I thought I had one around here, but there are tack systems that you can get. It's like a little tack and a little piece of plastic that wraps around. You basically tack in with a hammer, and then they got different sizes. So if you need a bigger one, smaller one, you can go to the hardware store and check that out. That would be my request and our suggestion. The better thing on that is you can pull them out a little bit, so you can bring in and out cables if you need to.
Go ahead, Jason.
I've actually used a peel and stick product that I use inside of a lot of work boxes and things like that for cable management. And it's a plastic sticky that goes on in a piece of Velcro, like a bread tie that we used to get. And it does a nice job of holding it where you need it. You can drive a screw through the plate, and you can take the tab in and out because it has like a ladder system. So you can take and suck a bunch of cables or just one cable. Makes it very easy.
That's great. Next question.
The next question is from Matt Cool in Montreal, Quebec. In Office Hours 2.0, what happens to Panelists 21 and higher?
It all has to be managed in the back end by hand. It's really painful. so it's one of the things that the system isn't really designed for right now. Basically, what we're going to be moving towards is a 20-person panel. So we're working on an invite system for the panelist, which is why super useful for people to jump on the panel over the next 2 to 4 weeks as we kind of work through this, because we're trying to figure out, we're basically going to build this kind of process to where people get invited to the panel, and we're going to invite 20 people and try to fill 20 spots, but we're probably not, it's probably going to become invite only so that we can keep it to 20 so that we don't go over the technical limit. And we have found that, it's great to have all of you here today, but we have found that the return on the overall show over 20 is, we've thought about putting more computers in and adding that. And I'm not certain that we need more than 20 to execute the show. I think it's great when we have it, especially over these kind of holiday breaks. So we don't want to turn it down, but right now, we might do it over weekends or something like that. But I think that, and we may increase that. We'll see. But right now we have found that 16 to 20 is a really good number as far as the number of people and what it looks like in the overall in the overall production of the show. So we're going to work on that process there. Go ahead, Dennis.
Yeah, essentially anyone over 20 doesn't have a seat in the system, and so there's no way for us to bring them up into the image directly. The only place that you would ever be able to find them if they're not in the system is in the screen share view, which essentially replicates what you see in the active speaker view in Zoom. So yeah, sometimes when someone hasn't ended up in the system properly for some reason, I've used that in order to be able to show them during a show. Right. But yeah, essentially, as you say, more than 20 and you're really struggling.
Yeah, and we may expand it, if we really feel like we need to. But right now we're looking at trying to make 20 work really well, as opposed to trying to make it larger. Go ahead, Matt.
May I make a suggestion for your invite tool? Maybe ask everyone to put in keywords of subjects that they feel they're competent on.
Yep.
So that when it's audio day, you can type in the word audio and take the top 20 people to invite them.
Yeah. We'll probably discuss that more down the road. We have a lot of theories about how to do that, and it probably will work at different levels for different days. That different specialties. To your point, there's probably going to be different rotations, which we've used in radio. So there's like the ringer rotation, which is like for audio, we know that these are the 8 people that we want to at least invite first. Then there's like the regulars that we'll put in as the other 8, and then there's like 4 that are wild cards. And then people will just approve or not. They'll get the initial invite, and they'll choose to say yes or no, and then the real key is not the invites; it's the cascading system, so that you have a whole bunch of processes there that are constantly. If these people can't make it for that given day, which will be 1 or 2 weeks in advance, then it'll cascade through the group of folks, and keep on inviting people until the goal is for the system to regularly be able to deliver 16 to 20 people that are appropriate for that day, and also give as many people as we can an opportunity to be on the show. Go ahead, Alex.
Bear in mind that people who attend in the afternoon or late at night, in the case of Australians, and the people from the UK and people from Europe, is that our days can change very quickly at short notice, so that we may accept an invite maybe 8 hours in advance, but then 1 hour in advance we may not be able to make it, or vice versa.
Yeah, and so we'll try to. That's why we're going to invite 20. The system doesn't work great under 16. So if we find that the cascade system doesn't work, we may add it so that we're trying to fill 24. So that we have a little bit more. But we'd like to get to a minimum of 16 and a maximum of 20. That's the goal. And obviously, if people will need to be careful about what they commit to. And it won't be a day before, it'll be a week before, 2 weeks before. So they'll have to figure that out. And then as soon as they know that they can't do it, they just have to push it back into the system so that somebody else will get invited. So that's kind of the cascade. And again, it'll probably take us a year to figure this out. Go ahead, Dennis.
Yeah, I was going to make the point that you just did about having a few people in reserve. So if someone has an emergency and drops out during the show, there's someone else who can jump in to fill their spot.
What we may do is say that there's people who see a subject that's coming up, and because part of this is also giving people enough warning so that panelists can see something a month out and go, oh, I want to be part of that, and they just put themselves on the list of that's something that I'm really interested in. So those are other things that we want to try to figure out in that puzzle. Go ahead, Rupert.
If the invitations were keyword based or skill based or interest based, then it may need some accommodation there in case that ever changes. Like today, we had a second hour change at late notice, so you need some way of kind of figuring that out if that happens at the last minute.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
The next question is from Guy Cochran in Seattle in the USA. What's new in the Zoom Rooms update?
Jonas?
There are 2 really amazing updates. One of them is something they announced. The other one is just something that they silently fixed. And the first one is if you have a Zoom room that is not for personal use, you can use the NDI feature now over the web interface. And they redid the web interface. It's way more stable now. And the other one is you now can finally assign Zoom rooms into a breakout room without needing a tablet being active. NDI in this breakout rooms, the combination of both still doesn't work, but we're getting there.
Slowly but surely. Next question.
The next question is from Mitchell Hill in Wilmington, Delaware. Looking to light the shelves behind me, should I use an LED RGB-W strip or cover the T12 practical light with a gel tube, or both?
Go ahead, Jason.
I actually was doing this to be on the show today, so I can cut away to my other camera here. I actually just used some PVC and some tape light to create my backdrop that you can see here. It actually worked pretty well, so I'm fairly happy with it, and I think it worked really well for you.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yes, I would go with the LED RGB-W because it'll give you the most flexibility in lighting because there are strip lights. You can move them. It depends on whether you want to light the things that are on the shelf or the wall behind the shelf. So you can just position that strip behind the items on the shelf and conceal it. Or if they have a lip along the top edge, you could put them on the back of the lip and clandestinely light each shelf. And all those, the Wi-Fi controllers for the RGB-W strips are controllable from an app, so that you can actually change the level and the color and the balance from the app, or through the Amazon Echo or Google Home voice control. You can control them with your voice and tell them to go down 10%, come up 10%. You don't even have to get out the app. That's very convenient. Or you can actually change color from the voice control.
Go ahead, Alan.
And to second, third, the LED strips, everything you can see on mine is all LED strips. All of it is the Wi-Fi controllable through Google. And if you check out, I will try and find out which ones they are. I think it's the Groovy ones, which are actually controllable through the Stream Deck as well. To put add-ons on there, so you'll be able to control them that way. They're infinitely more practical to use than a T12 tube.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
For a number of reasons.
Yeah, I have the T12 already in there, and it's on right now. It's a low color temperature, and I thought, well, this might be the cheapest way to do it, but not the best way. And I like the idea of lighting the shelves, as I've seen across the panel. I also have a dead spot right here, which is actually a rack, which I can't move. And I've already decided to put an on-the-air light here, a little neon light here to light it up. And I'm going to put a Dero meter just so I have some activity. But the Roscoe LED strip lights with a DMX controller, expensive, but probably would cover every possible scenario.
Go ahead, David.
Yeah, I have the RGB-W by a company called Luminoodle. They have a magnetic thing because the shells behind me are steel, so it kind of snakes under the lip right there. And then it's all remote control, except for that one is having problems, and you can toggle different colors with a handy little remote.
Next question.
Our next question is from David Paskin in Miami, Florida. What is Alex's new mic and why the change?
This is a Neumann TLM 102. I've had it for years, and I usually just use it for voiceovers. And I realized that the reason that I wasn't using it for the show was because of how much it picks up around me, and like air and everything else. And then I realized the last time I made a decision about not using it, I didn't have noise assist. So I was like, oh, I'll give it a shot. And I tried to use it for Mac Break yesterday. And one of the things is, for an expensive mic, it has an extraordinarily cheap plastic only screw mount. And so once I figured out how to get it onto the arm, I know that I can't, if I take it off again, I won't be able to put it on any arm again. I've already ordered a replacement for it, but I stripped some of the stuff at the very beginning. If you get it just a little off angle, it falls apart. I think I need to figure that out. I'm going to probably basically machine something that fits into the lower piece and then tap it correctly so that I have a metal piece to it, not a plastic piece. So that's why. I don't know how it sounds. I think it has more high end than the Heil does. I mean, as far as from a resonance perspective, I think it's picking up more of my voice. But I don't know if that's good or bad. But usually I don't use the Heil for voiceovers. I use them for radio, and I usually use this for voiceovers because it picks up a higher range from my voice. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, the Heil sounds more like a radio mic, and that mic that you have, the Neumann, sounds more natural. Yeah. And I noticed with the Heil, the proximity was just a little sometimes overbearing. It's kind of crunchy. Mm-hmm. That is a perfect mic for you.
Yeah, I've been had it for years and happy with it. It's a good mic. Go ahead, Dennis.
It sounds great. The one thing I do notice is I'm hearing you click your mouse now, which I wasn't before. Yeah, I have to get, now that that's the reason I wasn't using it, was because it doesn't have the same off axis. And so I need to get faster at I need to either get rid of the mouse or I need to get faster at turning it off between things that I'm talking about. But that, you're pointing out the one thing that the reason I didn't use it before. And I may still decide that it isn't working, but I do like the way it sounds. And so I'm going to play with it over the next 10 days or so and just see if I can't get my system in a place that it works, because I think it does sound a lot better. Go ahead, Sky.
I just love the concept of a sommelier of sound, and that we are starting to hear the nuances of the different subtleties, and that Mitchell actually pointed out a style of an audible that we're used to has a concept of, a radio mic or a voiceover mic. And so I'm just happy that we're learning and these different subtleties of the tools that we're using.
Yeah, it is. I think that the ruthless reviews, while they are good for us to get better, also help tune our eyes and our ears, towards very, very small little details. And from the there's a saying
Otherwise, we
called,
get sold stuff by people that want to, sell us stuff.
right. Aim small, hit small. Go ahead, Matt.
I don't know if you can rotate that mic at all. I know you're talking past the pickup area, but it seems to be pointing towards your mouse a little bit. And if it's
in a weird
plosives,
angle,
like-
it's hard to get into another. That's part of what I'm playing with. There's another problem, which is that I think I need a right angle XLR cable because it's kind of pushing down, in the direction that it's in. So there's some lack of dexterity there.
I agree. It sounds really good.
Yeah. Courtney?
Yeah, I think it sounds very good too. One thing you might consider is coming in from the side. If it's a side address, come in like this with the element facing towards you, and that way the back of the mic, which if it's cardioid instead of omni, would be facing your keyboard. So that would give you the maximum isolation of your keyboard from your mouth, and you could keep it out and also out of your way for getting to the keyboard.
Yeah, I may play with it. I kind of want to lean it back. And again, part of the problem is the way the XLR cable comes out of it right now. So I'm going to get a right angle, which will give me a little bit more movement of where I can put it. So a little bit more playing. But anyway, that's the highlight of Alex's mic right now. All right, next question.
The next question is from Noah Sargent in Fullerton, California. I've had my in-ear monitors for about 5 years now. How long would you keep your custom in-ears before you think their drivers are worn out with weekly or sometimes daily use?
Go ahead, Matt.
Wow, it's the Matt show. I've had these Shure 215s for 15 years. I love them. I bought the 535s as well that I use with the band. These still work great. It's gross, but you need to clean them out often to keep the earwax out of them. But if anyone ever tells you their in-ears aren't working, 9 times out of 10, it's a buildup of stuff inside of it that needs to be cleaned out. But hey, if it still sounds good to you, still use them. Compare them regularly to regular cans that you have, maybe, to make sure that you're not losing any frequencies. But they seem to last a long time.
I'm never gonna get the visual of earwax out of my head, like little Ewoks, but in your ears. Like it's all I'm gonna be able to think about now. Anyway, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, nothing worse than an Ewok in the ear in the morning.
Earwalk.
Earwax. Yeah. Normally, drivers, especially for in-ears, don't really wear out unless you send an overvoltage to them that could fry them or something. They should work forever. Or if they get sand in them, that would be the other problem. But usually with a custom ear piece, you're never going to get sand in it unless you have a lot of sand in your ears before you put your earpieces in. So clean your ears first, and then clean your make sure you clean the rubber, the custom molded plastic. Boil it. Well, I'd be careful with boiling water, but clean it with hot water or alcohol frequently, and that should keep it clean enough to keep the sound sounding good.
It's one of the things I like about the Atomotics is they have a little filter that you can pull out. So you can actually drill in, it's got a little piece and you can screw into it, pull it out, and replace it, which has been super useful. Go ahead, Alan. Are you there, Alan?
Sorry, my unmute is not working very well. So I'm not wearing my customs anymore because they don't fit my ears anymore. I had it about 8 years ago. The sound quality is absolutely fine, but your ear canals do ever so slightly change shape. And mine have just obviously since I had them originally made, have changed enough where they're now uncomfortable to wear. So at some point I will have them remade and recast, but at the minute I can't use them. But they absolutely sound exactly the same, and that's if you've got good quality ones, they should last 15 years using.
Noah?
Yeah, Alan, as soon as you said that, it reminded me that the sales guy told me that every 3 years or so, maybe 5 years, that's when your ear canal kind of shifts. So I guess maybe it's more of that rather than the drivers just failing over time. Maybe my ears just changing, and they do seem less comfortable than they were originally. So I don't know if that's the difference there.
Yeah, and it was a couple of $100 to have them recast, from what I was told.
Next question.
The next question is from Ray Harwood in Avondale, Arizona. I heard Alex mention that his wife does Zoom meetings all by herself. Will she be joining us for second hour on Friday?
I don't think so. She's actually in an event. so she's actually right now. She's about 40 feet away doing an event, and I think she's doing it through that day. So I don't think she'll be on. Well, I'll see if she'll talk about it. She's usually. I know it sounds crazy that because she does public announcements within her events, but she's not a very public person. She used to be a public person, so I think she's overly sensitive to it because she used to be on TV. Next question.
The next question comes from Scott Mueller in Germantown, New York. Are there any other noise reduction plugins like Noise Assist that live outside of the Sound Devices platform that would work in real time?
Cedar, which is a lot more expensive than the Sound Devices solutions. That's the most popular one. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, a lot of the computer interfaces like URI and other companies have the ability to accept plugins. Some of them specific to that device, but if you want to go real top quality, it's the Wave Sound Grid is nice. I know Douglas likes that, and Alex doesn't necessarily like it in a live venue, but they'll all do it real time, and they'll do a nifty job of making it sound great.
Yeah, and some of the plugins, I think that I was trying to think. There's an NVIDIA, some of the NVIDIA RTX solutions will work. CRISPR is something that we talked about earlier that will do some of the noise reduction. I don't think it's as good, but it's still pretty good. And I want to say just from the Waves platform, I think is great in a studio that is built for it and it doesn't move. Where we've had trouble with it is when it's brought in and has to suddenly deal with a bunch of new solutions is where we haven't found it to be the most stable solution. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, what Alex was talking about was the NVIDIA RTX. Oops, sorry. Not that one. That one. NVIDIA RTX voice, and it only works, of course, if you have an NVIDIA RTX video card plugged into your computer. So if you're on a Mac, that may be a problem. But it works extremely well for filtering out a voice from any other type of background sounds, including other people talking in the room and things like that.
Next question.
The next question is from Danny Law in Malaysia. How many devices can you connect to a USB-C hub before it overloads the USB-C port on your M1 Mac Mini or MacBook?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Sorry. My USB bus was overloaded. It depends. Where's Mickey? It depends on whether those devices are USB 2, USB 3. So you can overload the bus, but it takes quite a bit of data to overload the bus. And you have a limited number of ports that you can plug into, so there are so many streams available on each USB channel. So usually those hubs are arranged so that they don't you can't plug in more items or channels than that particular channel is capable of. If you start cascading hubs, you could get into trouble of overloading the USB bus. But generally, I don't think you have to worry too much about it if they're USB 3, which most USB-C type ports are these days.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, this is a very sticky wicket because right now, as far as I've been able to read, they've never really given you a definite answer on how many things you can plug into a Thunderbolt 4. I know with Thunderbolt 3, you can plug in up to 6 devices. And any type of USB that's 3.0 is usually at least about 5 gigabits per second. So if your Thunderbolt 4 goes up to 40, then you have that factor right there. USB 2 goes to 480 megabits per second, so now you can expand it from there. And then, of course, you got the power issue of things, and a lot of hubs are can be self-powered and anything like that. So they come in with a whole bunch of stuff, and inside those hubs are different types of chips. So those chips might be, if you're trying to plug in hub to hub to hub, those chips might be competing with other chips. The best thing to do is just to keep it as minimal as possible. Otherwise, you will run into major problems.
I go, Jason. Can't hear you, Jason.
Sorry about that. I have the CalDigit dock, which is nice because it gives me 4 USB 3.0s and then 3 USB-Cs on the back. This is Thunderbolt 4, has a dedicated bus port. One of the nice things with this is I've been able to fully populate it with hard drives, devices, things like that, and I haven't exceeded it. I've also put on an additional dongle to this to be able to get network and things like that, and it's worked really well both with the M1 Mini and my MacBook Pro M1. So.
Yeah, I think that the USB 4 is a big deal. Like once you get USB 3 gives you most of the headroom you need. USB 4 I think gives you. I haven't been able to max out buses at 40 gigabits per second so far. I'm sure if I think about it some more, we'll figure it out. Next question.
Our next question comes from Tony Mobley in Newnan, Georgia, and he asks, how many panelists are going to see The Matrix Resurrections in theatre versus HBO Max?
Go ahead, Nigel.
So we just watched Spider-Man at the theatre, and the sound was great, but the picture wasn't great. So I think we're going to try and do, and I don't know whether that's projection or whatever it is digitally. It just felt grainy to me. So we're going to try The Matrix at home.
Go ahead, Rupert.
Yeah, I think I'm going to do it at home also. I actually haven't seen a big release at home yet. I haven't used any of the opportunities to do that. I think this might be a good one. I've been to the movie theatre a million times, so I'm kind of up for the new experience of having it at home.
Good, Tony.
I'm going to see it at home as well.
Jeffrey?
Yeah, we saw Spider-Man as well at the theater, and the problem was the projector was creating this hum, so during the whole movie it sounded like there was a suspenseful moment happening at every single time. With that said, we already technically paid for the ticket with HBO Max, so why not go watch it from home?
George?
So Nigel and Jeffrey hit it. I mean, going to the theater is great, and my 16-year-old convinced us to go to the theater to watch Spider-Man. The audio was awful. So I'm going to blast my HomePods that sound great and watch it at home.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, and these days, it depends on where you are. If you're in Hollywood, it might be a little bit different. But in Georgia, actually, there's a lot of production that goes on in Georgia. A lot of theaters in the rural areas are only 2K anyway. So your 4K display at home with HBO Max, streaming 4K from a good streaming device, like a Roku, latest Roku or Apple TV or something that can handle HDR 4K, it's going to look better at home, actually, than it will in the theater.
Yeah. I think that I have a pretty good system at home. And so I think that the problem is that it's really hard for a theater. I can go to maybe see it at a Dolby theater or an IMAX theater, but then it's just the logistics. I think now that I've gotten used to not going into the city, I'm not going into the city anymore. So I've been to San Francisco, which is only about 35 minutes away, maybe 4 times in the last 2 years. So I don't. It just seems like a long way away now. Next question.
Our next question is from Georgie Kennedy Jr. in Washington, D.C. Any potential issues installing an Ethernet cable alongside a power cable in a conduit?
Go ahead, Grant.
Yes, there is. I mean, there's a few different concerns. You certainly can do it. There are concerns around the interference from the power into Ethernet, particularly because Ethernet is low voltage, and so you can get a little bit of electromagnetic interference that can happen between the two cables, particularly the longer that you run them together. It's certainly against code. So if there was any issues of insurance or problems with it, if it's a long-term thing, you would try to do anything to avoid that. And so because if there was a fire that broke out, which is possible, it's obviously rare but possible, then you could have all sorts of insurance investigations that wouldn't go in your favor. But if you had to do it only for a short time, then using shielded cables, using like a Cat6 shielded cable will help, and maximizing, I think you're saying about putting it in the same conduit. Ideally, you would not do that and have as much distance, probably at least kind of 8 inches that you would go separating them. If they're really good shielded cables, you might be able to do 2 inches, but not really in the same conduit.
Go ahead, George.
Thanks for that feedback. Definitely, while it doesn't look great, I did decide to go with 2 separate conduits. So just separate them out completely. So I'm going from indoors to outdoors. So I just went ahead and put it in separate conduits. So I just wanted to get an idea of what everyone is doing and give some feedback.
Go ahead, Rupert.
Yeah, there's a whole load of reasons it's a bad idea, many of which Grant covered, and there's very few reasons it would ever be a good idea. It's against code in most cases, specifically on the electrical side. I'll give you one example of why. Electrical conduit is generally sized accordingly for the amount of cables you're going to put in it, and the considerations for that include that allowing a certain amount of airflow and heat dissipation. If you compromise that by stuffing data cables down, then you risk, the electrical side overheating your entire installation. So it's just not a good idea.
Nothing like burning down the house. All right, next question.
Our next question comes from Sky Gleason in Seattle, Washington. He's got a question for Nigel Dessau. Would you be interested in hosting a Business of Business lab?
Go ahead, Nigel.
Well, I'd be happy to do anything I can to help anybody, but I'm not the only one here who's run big businesses before, so I think there's lots of us that could help. And I think the way Alex was describing Monday, that feels like that's the right time to do that. And I think if we're going to do it, we need to keep it on business and not let it stretch into other subjects.
Yeah, Sky.
Well, the subtlety that we learned about the mic in seeing different things, I guess there's different people with different skills here, and the business of being sustainable, the business of being profitable, the business of a margin, these are things that are not everybody's skill set, and these are things that I'm needing to learn more and more about and how other people do it. So I'd be very interested in that, and if Monday's a focus on that concept of sustainability, I'm very excited about that. Thank you.
Yeah, that's what we're leaning towards for 2022 is that, Fridays is more of a nuts and bolts of how to do things, more of a technical, and Mondays are more of a business, and then the days in between are a little bit of everything. So audio, video, artistry. So we have like the Tuesdays being audio, Wednesdays being video, Thursdays being artistry, and that can be lots of different things just to remind us of what we're doing and thinking creatively. Friday being kind of a nuts and bolts day of, AWS and wiring and things like that. And then Monday being really kind of a business day where we really think about how we actually pay for all of this. So anyway, that's kind of the
2022 is going to be awesome.
Slowly coming together.
It's really going to be awesome.
That's the theory. All right, next question.
Our next question is from Tim Home in San Lorenzo, California. Where can I find set design examples for 2 people speaking directly to one central camera?
Go ahead, Noah.
My thought was just like for Tim specifically to kind of expand on the question. Are you looking for kind of inspiration or behind the scenes type stuff?
Yeah. So basically, what we do at our house of worship is we have the live service that's happening, and then at times we bounce it back to another place where there are basically 2 live hosts that can. Sorry about my video. I don't know what's happening, but basically that 2 people can, we just kind of bounce it back and forth to this set that's always there.
You're going to say something, Noah?
Oh, yeah. Just for that particular circumstance, it's nice to have separation, right, for that background and those elements, and then you want it visual enough that it's interesting, but not so visual that's distracting. Those are the only thoughts that come to mind right now.
Yeah, go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, I was going to say that I don't think it's hard to find good examples because I don't know that it's a great thing to do. As in I get in now understanding your example, which actually is a really good one because it's essentially the idea of a hybrid event where you're taking the live event that's happening and then making a custom version for the online audience, which is super cool. And so then it depends on how much they're interacting, those two people. But I think that the whole virtual event space that we're in now, we've seen how much better it is to have two cameras. And even if you can't do two cameras, even cropping and having two separate shots, virtual shots that you can cut to, because of the focus that people have on those cameras rather than each other. If your audience is just watching those two people talking, it's a different experience than when they're engaging with the audience through the camera. And by having a single camera each, it's a better example.
It's definitely for a direct to the audience focus. So the reason we have two people is because as one person's running out of things to say, the other one can keep energy into the room, basically.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, the two cameras.
If you're just looking for examples, a good place is just do a Google search for TV sets, and you can see those. But most of these setups are designed for two people who are in an interview situation talking to each other, rather than directly to the camera, which is you just mentioned. So I'm not sure if those examples would work for you, but a thing to consider is I would vote against it, like Grant says, is because if you have two people on camera and they're both looking at the camera, while one person is talking, the other person has to figure out what to do. Whether to look at the other person, look at the camera, look interested, look bored, and it's distracting, I think, for the viewer at home to have to deal with the second person on camera when you're getting all the information from one of the two. So I would vote for, if you have to, you can do a two-shot, but be able to have something that will swing back and forth between singles to keep, to avoid that situation of having a person on camera and look uncomfortable.
You go ahead, Lois.
I think that this is a situation where it would be really good if you had a human being there to do the two-shot zoom into the one, maybe pan over, just do a regular television show style thing with two people sitting on a couch.
Yeah, the main thing is that anytime we have more than one person, we almost always go to three cameras because we want a master shot with the two of them that they can be looking at plus crosses. Because the problem really is with one camera moving around is that you end up with a lot of profiles of the people that are sitting there. You can do it, and you also have to move it during while they're talking, and it's really hard to do that for a long period of time. So usually we try to do that. Now, what that does do also is that you now need tally. And you need guests that know how to use tally because you're going to be, what they're addressing is going to be different. You definitely can pull it off with one camera. It's not ever going to be great. It's going to be what it is. Where you want to try to swing those cameras out. And then what I would recommend with two people is you have one person that's kind of the person that's going to manage most of the conversation and another person who's kind of the social desk that's going to bring questions in from folks. As we have found here, and it was why we did it here, and as a result of many things. If you open it up to questions and your audience knows there's going to be questions, you can run for days on that. So if you have enough viewers. And so the thing is that a church experience would be the same as there's lots of things people want to know, and they're thinking about, and they're worried about, and they want to talk about. So having one person bringing the questions in and another person answering them, or another group of people answering them, really allows you to play with that a lot more than trying to have both of them be equal guests. So you just want to kind of think through that cascade. Next question.
The next question is from George Butters in Halifax, Nova Scotia. How many office hours members will actually disconnect during the holidays? For a few hours, for a day, multiple days? How will you cope with digital withdrawal?
Go ahead, Laura.
No, this is my disconnection from my life, my next 2 weeks. Being able to spend more time with my global family is really my disconnection from work and the rest of my life.
Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I try to disconnect from technology whenever I'm with my family, mealtime, all that stuff. No phones, no nothing. The rest of the time, like Laura, this is my time to connect. I worked on a cruise ship a little while ago for a month, and I went nuts because I didn't have that connection to the rest of the world. So, yeah, just limited times with family. That's it.
Go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, I think it's really important to be present in the moment wherever we are, right? And so creating a habit or a discipline around that is something that I'm challenged by. But I'm specifically about office hours. I think it is the season of giving, and I do think that we have a culture here of sharing information and giving of the things that we've learnt. And so I think today is an example of many people coming, many people showing up because we have a bit more time. And I think that's great because we actually are sharing. If we continue that culture of sharing, it's actually just giving information. And it's just a beautiful place to be in.
David?
I've been working on this paint by number behind me and plan to give the place a top-down deep clean, pull all the furniture away from the walls, from everything. So I'll be offline probably till the new year.
Say it isn't so. Go ahead, Doug.
It's hard for me that I don't know what a weekend is, or I just know dates. Like if I, get an event that like, hey, am I free? I don't know. Because I am always at the mercy of the client. So, and in the sports world, I work a lot on the weekends. So I have to run replay New Year's Day. So I don't really know what a holiday is. I do take time off. I work hard, but I play hard too. But yeah, it's very hard to disconnect when you're not really in charge of your schedule. It's like I have to work when the client says I need to work, or else I don't get paid. So it's hard for me to disconnect. But in the same token, I love what I do, and so being part of you guys every day. I mean, yeah, I'm working in the background, but I love being part of this community. And I do need to take time for family stuff. So it is a balance. And to Grant's point, that you do need to find that balance, because when you get out of balance is when things go awry. So it's interesting, but fun at the same time.
Good, Lois.
Well, for me, there's not a lot of difference between one week and the next. I have some commitments, but they're continuous. We have no children. We aren't going anyplace, no traveling, any of that stuff. So I agree that wherever you are, whatever you're doing, you should just do it. So I'll be here when I'm here, and I won't when I'm not. And it really has nothing to do with holidays.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Those are all very lovely sentiments. But as the Borg say, I have been assimilated, and resistance is futile. So this is as much of my breathing and living and sharing and all those great feelings. I do this for fun too. I can't imagine leaving, and I would have very serious pains if I had to be kicked off or go away or something happens and I can't continue.
Yeah, I mentioned to someone that we're going to still do office hours and the education hour on Saturday, and they're like, "You're working on Christmas?" And I said, I don't really think of it as work. Like that is like you go out to like things to hang out with your friends around the holidays. This is my version of hanging out with my friends during the holidays. So I don't. So this that using the technology doesn't really. I don't look at this as my work time. So I think that's how I approach it. And I will admit that I don't like changes in my schedule. So anyway, I have a tendency to not change anything, and even through holidays, I just kind of plow through and do the same thing every day. Next question.
Our next question is from Mitchell Hill in Wilmington, Delaware. How many people will be using the holidays to make improvements to their studio, and what changes?
Go ahead, David.
Yeah, as I mentioned, I will be around. I just won't be with this kit because as part of the deep clean, it's going to be a little rejiggering of things, maybe change a few things on the shelves, but I'll be around. Yeah.
Okay, good. Lois?
So I am finally going to have an actual space to do this stuff. Every time I come up with a new art form that I test out, I get a whole bunch of stuff, and then I have to figure out where am I going to work. So I'm taking one of the back rooms, cleaning out 4 different kinds of art mediums that I won't be using, and changing it into audio video stuff. So Boy, it's going to be a challenge. I wish I had you all guys here to help me, but... Oh, by the way, Alex, I think that Saturday morning, that's when we open our presents for Christmas, and that's us.
I think that we have a present on Saturday morning, a little one right at the very beginning. So I would, I would definitely be here on Saturday morning, at least at the very beginning at 7 a.m. Pacific, if you can make it. I think we have a little special present for everybody. Go ahead, Mitchell.
I enjoy that 2-week period at this time of year when I don't have any pesky jobs where I make my money and my living coming in. I can just live off the largesse of the last few projects I worked on. So in my case, I'm going to definitely use that time wisely. There's some things I need to work on as far as here is concerned. I have this issue with the light bouncing off a brand new building. It just went up, hitting me in the face. Right now, I've got a flag leaning against the wall and a towel wrapped around it so it doesn't have any light leaks. So I'm going to deal with that. I'm going to deal with this dark area over here that Alex pointed out is annoying. I'm going to put an on-the-air light there. And I was just talking to Michael Duro, the inventor of the Duro meter, this really cool LED peak meters. I think it would look great sitting on top behind me, and a few little odds and ends. And thanks for the advice on the LED strips. I think that'll make an appearance too. So it's 2 weeks of fun on top of other fun. So it'll be fun. And I like Lois's idea of opening presents because I think I got a message that B&H has made some deliveries today, so I can open them on camera. And Alex is being very still, so...
Okay, go ahead, George.
So I've got a heavy lift. I've got a new uplift desk. There's a butcher block here that needs to be stained and bored holes into. There's an X32. So I've got my hands full for the next couple of weeks trying to reconfigure this entire suite and do some upgrades.
Nigel?
Yeah, so I finally had my channels put into my blackout shade, so I can now really turn the light off outside to almost zero. So I've got control of my lighting, and there is a UPS truck somewhere trundling around Texas with a M1 Pro Max thingy or Max on it, and I'm guessing I'm going to have to work out how to connect that, which has given me my other problem, which is I'd really like to connect multiple monitors to it, and I'm in dock nightmare trying to work out which one. But I do notice that OWC has a sale today, so I'm trying to work out which would give me the most monitors.
And of course, over Christmas, I will be boxing everything up and getting ready to move, so I'm looking forward to that. Our next question comes from Sky Gleason in Seattle, Washington. The story of a thing. When is propaganda used in storytelling? How could a documentary keep from being a self-serving, long-form promotion piece? Go ahead, Lois.
Well, I think it's propaganda is in the eye of the beholder. If I tell you my honest opinion about something, well, a lot of people are going to say that's propaganda. If I try and look at the world outside and show you this, that, the other thing, the way in which I see it is going to determine how I tell the story. And some people won't like that, and they'll say, oh, it's propaganda. So I think the problem is the word propaganda. It's not the story that we're telling.
Courtney?
Yes, as an editor of reality television, Sky, you should know about crafting a story or point of view from random footage and building a story that wasn't necessarily there, which makes it kind of propaganda. Jean-Luc Godard had the quote, a documentary is truth 24 times a second. You could do things like the Beatles documentary that was just on, where it has no narration. So you're not inserting a point of view, you're just showing things as they happened. Of course, you can still tailor that to be propaganda-like by, changing the cutting and only covering certain portions of things which, exhibit a certain point of view, but without narratively letting the images and the occurrence themselves in a documentary control the narrative. is kind of the cleanest way. And I think the only thing that he interjected in that was a few title slides that gave you some background about stuff that was happening behind the scenes that wasn't on camera, so that you could kind of piece together what was happening as the Beatles were doing that recording session over the several weeks. But other than that, it was pretty much just cinema verite.
Sky?
Well, and the cinema verite is the letting the story tell itself rather than you promoting or producing a thing. And I guess that's where the word propaganda, as I have been a part of the broadcast narrative, I, from the inside out, realized that reality TV is not. It's TV, but it's hardly reality. It's very heavily produced oftentimes and scripted, and the actors are paid, or at least to a point. And so that's where the honesty to reveal a story, the Beatles is the most like that concept. However, I think they're kind of a unicorn. That story's a unicorn of a story because it's the Beatles. If we did 18 hours of office hours, I don't think we'd get the same viewership. So that's where I'm trying to narrow down what is a story in a certain package that people would be interested in. What is the message that I love, Lois, your point is, it is going to be my point of view. So that's why I'm asking, what is a story and what is not a story? So that's where a long form promotional piece is what I do for a living. So, and John Preto actually inspired this because the concept of a rocket launch is a really cool timeline of a thing, but how could that be possible backbone of a metaphor, for metaphors of what is the office hours community story?
Mitchell.
Sky Gleason is the Ringo Starr of office hours. I appreciate that. And from the heart, I know I'm very sarcastic sometimes. I have to say that all of it, regardless of whether it's propaganda or documentary or a TV commercial or an infomercial, is telling some kind of a story where there has to be motivation and some involvement with the people watching. You have to feel involved to see what's going to happen at the end. You might be curious about what might happen on the road getting there. I think the only thing that changes is product placement.
Nigel.
Yeah, so I think this is an hour's conversation we're not going to get to here, but Lois is right. It's all about how it occurs to you. But I think the big difference I would hold is, are you trying to communicate your truth or change somebody else's? And I think if you're trying to change somebody else's, you've moved into propaganda. If you're trying to tell your truth, you're probably okay.
And Noah?
Sky, I love how you unpack this. I think there's cognitive bias that we all have. And so you got to identify those, research them and see what they are. And then obviously work towards not having them be a recurring or current theme in that project.
David.
And I agree with Nigel's point there. Propaganda that has a negative connotation, and be careful using it in situations like this.
Our next question comes from Alex Fordy-Golner in London. To consider working for Apple, what would your conditions be? And we'll start with Rupert.
I think right now, one of my conditions would be they make a commitment to remote work, either one way or the other, kind of come up with some definitive future policy that can set it kind of clear. I know we've seen stories here of them offering, I think, $1,000 for work at home stuff. So I think a condition of mine would be they raise that by 10 times at least.
Nigel.
Yeah, and I guess it depends on what level job you're going into, but my answer is RSU, not options, because one is real shares and the other is options.
Matt?
I wouldn't work full-time for them. I wouldn't work for any large company full-time. I would certainly try to become a supplier and work independently. You'll just be your own boss, control your own life. Once you've been your own boss, it's really tough to go back. But definitely work is work, and I would take it, but I wouldn't work for them full-time.
Alex?
I saw this job that was posted in September for product manager for AR products for Apple. So I thought about, firstly, I probably wouldn't be able to convince them I could do the job, but if I did, I thought, well, what would my conditions be? Well, in return for not being paid as much, so $100,000 is totally fine by me. I'd actually want to only be working in London and also only work 35 hours a week, whether digitally or on site. So that's my conditions.
And Courtney.
Yeah, I don't know how much negotiating room you have with Apple, but one thing, once you do go to work for Apple, be aware that you'll never be able to talk about your work with anyone ever again because of the non-disclosure agreements you have to sign.
Yeah, absolutely. Our next question is from Douglas Carmichael. A university professor created an office hours-like experience in a flipped classroom using Zoom's native Q&A functionality. To create an office hours-like experience, wouldn't you need Mukana to power it? And Grant.
Yeah, so a couple of things here. It would have to have been in the webinar, in Zoom webinar, because the Q&A module is not available in meeting. It's gotten better. So we used it for a little while on office hours. They have the vote up, which is great now, but they don't have a vote down. And Alex has spoken a lot about how having both of those is really key, particularly the larger the audience that you have. Having a vote down is not saying that you dislike the person or you hate their question or whatever. It's just that it's just not of interest to you. And so doing that is actually as powerful as voting up. So not having that is something. The other thing is that you don't have, like what we're doing, we're on multiple platforms. We're on YouTube now as well. And so having a unified experience for people that can be easily on a second device, and something about being in Zoom is you need to do it all on that one device, or you've got to join twice and it gets a bit clunky. So having a second device that you can join to do all of your Q&A is great. The third thing I'd say is something that we've talked about a lot, which is different services go to a whole nother level when they are open. They have open APIs, or at least an ability to be able to connect in, which is exactly what you can see has happened with Mukana. You've got a basic system that just takes questions and does some chat, but once it's been opened up, well, now we've got this whole other Office 2.0, which is driven by Mukana because of the data is all sitting in that place. So it opens up all these opportunities when you have your Q&A system sitting in an open system as a separate thing that people can access.
Yes, and of course, the other aspect of Mukana is that it's also driving the Office Hours 2.0 machine as well, which makes it easier in terms of cutting.
Can you guys hear me okay?
We can indeed.
Okay, sorry, I had a little internet issue. I think we've got it sorted. So cats internet. Anyway, what's the long story? Don't let the cat in the office. To talk to that a little bit, I only heard the tail end of that, is that, us having control over how that interface works with other apps is really, really important for what we're doing. We are looking at adding features of Mukana. One of the things that's a real pain point right now for us is the panelists having to go between the web and Zoom and a lot of other things. So I think that there's places that we're going to try to use the Zoom apps to tie a lot of Mukana's features back into Zoom itself. And whether we use the Q&A for that is another thing. But remember that most people are not going to watch this in Zoom, in the next little bit of time. So as soon as 2.0 goes forward, then 95%, maybe 99% will be watching on different platforms and not on Zoom. Next question. Sorry.
Okay, the next question is from Morgan Price in Victoria, British Columbia in Canada. Any best practices about how to bring in props or gear into a virtual first office hours-like session? Is the overhead shot the only feasible option?
I'll go ahead, Noah.
I see kind of 4 options for you. The overhead is obviously a really good one, right? So that is great. You can shoot B-roll ahead of time, right? Which is just clips of the piece of prop or whatever you have in action, doing stuff, what have you. Third would be to do some sort of screen capture if you have a design or a CAD or something that you want to show. And then finally would be some sort of graphic elements like a lower Fenwick, like we've seen before, to help also show details.
Go, Rupert.
If you want to like bring in and show things, I mean, you can just show things to camera like this. That has the advantage is you can still see me and I can see exactly what I'm showing you, and I'm still on mic and all kind of things like that. But if you're actually trying to demo a product, not so easy because you have one hand tied up with the thing. But you can do an overhead or a back shot, and that does give you, hands free. And then you just have to make a decision whether you want your audience to also see you at the same time, and whether you can see gallery to see them and see the reactions and so on, and just make sure that whatever you do, you're in a situation where you can stay on mic, or you have a decent audio solution so you don't go off mic.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
It depends on the product and it depends on the demonstration. A quick and easy way is to use your Apple phone and iPhone, and you can get a look at anything you might happen to want to use if you want to get in close or get a wide shot, whatever the case may be. Again, there's a nice shot of my temporary fix for my flag. It just depends on the application.
Go ahead, Courtney.
I'd vote against the iPhone because of the low frame rate. I like Rupert's idea of holding it up, and if you have a camera that does autofocus, it can keep you in the background and keep things focused. If it's something that exists on the internet, you can always cut to if it would just stay cut, bouncing. Cut to an Amazon screen or something where you can control the views from there, and most products have a pretty good 3D representation of their product online that you can access and put up, which is probably a little clearer and easier to see than somebody holding a phone up or holding the item up in front of the camera.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I have a over-the-shoulder PTZ camera that I can set up and go from there. The most important thing is to think before you start the show, figure out where your positions are going to be so you can pre-save those and go from there. And then, of course, the TV also brings in that video. So when I have this shot, they can see the over-the-shoulder shot of me working on whatever product I'm working on or anything like that.
Yeah, one of the things I'm going to be working on for the new version of that I'm going to use beyond USD or the building USDZ models. One of the things I'm looking at is using this little puck here that will sit under a turntable, and then it's programmable, and then having a close-up camera. So if I want to put an object on something, I can literally put it on a turntable and program or even control what angle I'm looking at of that object. And so I'm going to kind of play around with I've done it in the past with hand lazy Susans, but I haven't done it in this case with a motorized one, which is the next step. Next question.
Next question is from Noah Sargent in Fullerton, California. Alex, you talked about possibly adding a way for us to get feedback on how well we've answered a question as panelists. Could you talk about that process?
It's actually hidden in Mukana right now. If you click on the question, once it appears, if you're in the regular viewer mode and you click on the question that's in that list, you should be able to give it a heart. So you can actually vote it up. In that sense that you liked the answer or how we did that. We haven't really promoted it that much because we've been still playing with some of the mechanisms, but it's there now to give us feedback on how well we did on those questions. We may get more, may do a lot more in that area so that we can give feedback on even while someone's talking or whatever, and connecting, how the response works and so on and so forth. But we're not sure exactly how far we're going to go with that. Next question.
Our next question is from Jack B in Phoenix, Arizona. Mic and speaker issues on an M1 Macbook Pro 16-inch Pro model macOS Monterey 12.1. It seems to be intermittently crashing. Only observed when using Zoom, but this is system-wide. Is anyone else seeing this? The only solution is to restart the computer.
I'll go ahead, Jason.
I haven't seen that yet, and I have been using Zoom quite a bit with it. So I don't know exactly what's happening. I would recommend maybe doing an uninstall, but I haven't witnessed that myself.
Yeah, we are noticing that. I mean, I noticed that with our event on Saturday, that I couldn't use the mic or the speaker output for both Zoom and the Rode Go at the same time, which I've never seen before. So I do think that Monterey has a whole slew of audio issues. I mean, one of the things we've been talking about is the infamous orange dot that's appearing when other things are accessing it, which I would, at this point, if you're an event producer, would not upgrade to Monterey. In fact, I'm going to look at even back dropping anything that I put on Monterey that I plan to use in an event. Do not use Monterey if you're doing an event. I think until we figure out what the issues are, the answer is do not use Monterey. There are some key issues with audio and video in it, and I think I got a little aggressive at updating, and now I'm going to try to backtrack, and I'm definitely not going to put any new machines on Monterey unless I have to. Next question.
Rupert McRae from Dallas, Texas has the next question. When using rectangular softboxes, what is the creative decision whether to use them vertically or horizontally?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
It depends on how far away the light is from the talent, but if you have the choice of where you put it, I like the landscape way because it depends on the light wrap that you want to get, and you need a wider fixture in order to create that. If it wasn't, it might drop off in the wrong spot. So you gotta deal with the light wrap. That's where I'm coming from.
Go ahead, Alan.
Yeah, so it's fill and shadows basically. If you have it horizontally, you're going to wrap around more, and so you'll fill in. Having it horizontally, you will just be able to see a little bit of it, and it's what the light sees of you, and so how it affects. I mean, mine is horizontal at the side of me, so it's fulfilling the whole side of me. When I step back away from it, it doesn't fill as much. So.
And 9 times out of 10, I'll do it horizontally. if I'm doing a box, that's a rule of thumb. And then of course, there's tons of creative reasons to do it vertically. Next question.
The next question is from Brant Kruger in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Are there viable ways to use a flat screen monitor as a backdrop instead of green screen, or is that the best way if a client needs to use a digital backdrop?
Go ahead, David.
Yeah, we've used, I think it's up to 85, 90-inch LED behind talent, usually angled down a touch to fix the lighting and just make sure it's clean.
Yeah, Noah?
Yeah, to Dave's point, when you have a TV behind you, you have to consider a few things. I still prefer a TV over green screen. The glare, like David said. Secondly, the brightness, right? So you got to make sure the exposure is set well, or the brightness of the TV is set correctly, I should say, rather than that. Also, depending on the size of the TV, you could or could not fill the frame behind somebody, right? So you might need a pretty substantial size television if you need it to be complete. And you've probably heard this on the show before, but green screen, if it's not lit well and if it's not distance from your subject, you're going to have a hard time with green screen.
Go ahead, John.
Everything that the guys prior just said, I have a 60-inch back here, and I could not get it close enough to fit the frame. And so, just like David said, an 80 or a 90 behind you, and then the tilt. Alex has a good example from his New York studio or his Washington studio.
Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, we've talked about this a lot, as a matter of fact, and Alex has pointed out a few things that I didn't think of, and part of them are the pixel pitch, how close it is, and if it's tight, to eliminate moire, you don't want moire, and you have to be able to move it in order to find that sweet spot where the moire isn't interacting with the LEDs on the screen. So you need some space behind you to make that happen, and of course you need a big LED screen.
Go ahead, Alan.
I think everything has now almost been covered. The little screen behind me, which is a 42-inch one, I use that with another 42-inch flat, and I do some product things on it. So it's like it's on a video stage. That's another thing that a few people haven't done, but everything else has been sort of covered, I think.
Go ahead, Courtney.
One thing that hasn't been discussed yet is refresh rate. You may have to adjust the refresh rate of the screen or your camera to avoid flickering sometimes, because some LED screens or LED lit LCDs can flicker if you try and dim them down to an acceptable exposure level. They can start to flicker, so be careful about that. And you may have to adjust your camera's shutter rate, shutter angle or sample rate to eliminate the flicker.
And I was going to show you this is an example of kind of a setup like that. So this is in a studio. So what you see there is that's a 70-inch monitor that is behind. And we found that 70, as John alluded to, 70 is the minimum size that we can use. And then you figure out exactly where you can put the chair so that you have that framed, and then you have the camera and the lights. And the lights interact very much about the leaning down a little bit, as well as having it the lights kind of in the right place so that they don't reflect against that back monitor. I would highly recommend the monitor over green screen. It is way easier. In fact, you'll see in the next design that I show for my studio, I've decided to go ahead and I'm looking at 70-inch monitors that I'm going to put somewhere in on wheels in my studio, so that if I want to put a screen behind me, I can do that, and I can also use it as some other for other visuals and so on and so forth. So I'm definitely going to take some wall space away to put one on wheels, and then what I'm looking at is putting it on a hydraulic. It really, one thing is being able to adjust the height of the monitor easily is really important. When it's hard, you don't do it, and then you start doing all these weird somersaults. There's an interaction between the seat height, the camera height, and the monitor height, and for different people, it will be different. So you'll be moving those around to get it just right. So in our most advanced studios that we built, we actually have all of them on hydraulics so that we can move the camera, the person, the monitor up and down and adjust, especially if we're doing lots of people coming through the system. So if you're doing what we've done it at conventions, political conventions, where you have what we call SMTs. So these are satellite media tours. And in an SMT, we have one person after another doing hits. So they're doing 8-minute hits, and they're about 5 minutes apart, if you're lucky. And they're all different sizes of people. so we try to we learned over time to make all of those flexible so that we can move the monitors and the cameras and the lights up and down effectively. And that made a big difference. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, the satellite media tour is the exact application we have at work. We use chief mounts that have an electric vertical up. And over the past 18 months, I
meant electric too, not hydraulic.
We now refer to those as ZMTs.
Oh, ZMTs? What are the Zoom media tools?
We do them all the time.
Yeah, it's really popular. It's a really efficient use of talent. So we do them. We've recently, I guess we've been doing them over Zoom, so you could call them ZMTs. We've been doing them. We've done a couple with musicians, where the musician will meet with, one of the things you don't kind of see in the main process is a musician might meet with all of the Apple Music, the Pandoras, the Spotifys, and everything else. You get the musician into one place, and then you just bring different groups in one at a time to have a half an hour, seemingly, exclusive, to let them talk to them and get to know them and decide whether they want to put them into rotation. Next question.
Our next question is from Chris in Wisconsin. As the show develops, how will you ensure a diversity of panelists? It's not cheap to reach parity in the current set of panelists, and could naturally favor a narrower set of perspectives and ideas.
Yeah, it's going to be a challenge. I think that we definitely think about that a lot, but we also need to think of it as a show. I think that if you look on a day-to-day basis or across a week, you're seeing a pretty wide range of diversity as far as the backgrounds and people and so on and so forth. So I think that we're moving towards that. We've definitely taken ground in that area, and we'll continue to work on it. We may even build, now that we have now that we're a nonprofit, we may build a fund that people can put money into, so that we can make sure that we can equip people that might have something to add that we can put in there. So that's one of the conversations that we're going to have. But it'll probably be kind of a slow process as we kind of figure it out. Go ahead, Sky.
Early days, you'd said why you chose media as your initial infrastructure or your foundation, and maybe reiterate that part of the mission statement, in that the spinoff could be about butterflies or unicorns.
I mean, the main thing is that if we started anywhere else, if you started in gardening or cooking or whatever, you end up with a bunch of people that don't know how to use media. So you need people who are interested in media and then also have other passions. And so we definitely think that members will reach out into the things that they care about to make that work. And so that'll help grow over time. But yeah, one of the big problems will be is we are a subset of the world. We're the ones that have fast enough internet to do this. And Now, I think that we have a lot of things that we do in after hours and so on and so forth that is more forgiving, but we also have to take into account that we'll have more and more people just watching the broadcast, and you still have to make it you want to reach out as much as you can, but you still have to make it a watchable show. So people have, systems that aren't quite ready for it. We have to figure out a way to get them there, but it's not a matter of, if we go to a lowest common denominator for the show, we won't have any viewers, and then it won't matter. Go ahead, Rupert.
Yeah, I definitely think after hours is a big part of this. It's a place where people come in and get acquainted with the community and maybe fine tune their equipment and just get a better feel for everybody involved. And also Sunday office hours that's not necessarily broadcast right now, and it's just maybe got a little bit of a different pace where somebody could come in that isn't ready for the main show just yet.
Yeah. And the weekends will definitely, after hours and the weekends will definitely be places for people to kind of play with that. I think that what we're looking at as we get ready for Office Hours 2.0 is that after hours is a place to kind of tune and be part of it and have your camera on and get used to that process and get feedback. The weekends are a place for us to see how you interact with office hours in general. And then, especially over time, the main 5 days a week will be a different story. Go ahead, Alan.
And as has been said before, going into after hours and playing and talking to people. I mean, this setup I'm using here is not a particularly expensive setup. I know it all varies where you are, but the whole thing, cameras, lights, microphone, everything is literally $200. So it is doable. It is absolutely doable. And there's a lot of us who talk about how to do this on a shoestring because it's not our main, we don't have, 5,000 pound cameras and big mixers and everything. I don't do this now for a living, so I sort of do the lighting bit, but the stuff I can add, I can't afford to get the other things in.
And in the world of $200, Alan completely fits in. The frame looks great, the audio is good, all of it's working, so you don't have to go that far. Next question.
Our next question is from Craig McFarlane in Boston. Does it matter to optimize the hierarchy in USB hub and bus 2 and 3 when connecting multiple devices?
It definitely matters with power. So the power is different as you go into the computers. So this is something that I've learned with like a 14-inch iMac. Now, I don't know about the new MacBooks. I don't know about the new MacBook Pros, but the older ones, if you run Zoom and plug power into any outlet or any input other than the the right side back where your power used to go in when it was MagSafe, any other one of those will drain to zero while you're in the show. Like it's happened. So power makes a big difference. I'm not sure about. I think that oftentimes if you're doing video and depending on the computer, you will have to pay attention to what bus it's going on compared to other things. Next question.
David Brady in New York City asks, what is the workflow for office hours post-production for YouTube? Are the markers manually added, or is there an automation to import time code for chapter markers?
I think we lost Jeffrey for the second hour, but I believe that we built a tool that basically pulls it out. So Mukana is actually keeping track of all the questions. That's why it's so important for the question asker to ask those, to hit answer before they start reading the question, because it's laying out all those tags, and then it's just a cut and paste process from Mukana. It punches out a file that Jeffrey can use, and I think he has to clean up it a little bit, but it's pretty formatted, and it just goes straight into YouTube at that point. So it's pretty straightforward. Next question.
Our next question is from Lois Richter in Davis, California, and she would like to give an update on the birding project.
Go ahead, Lois.
Okay, so I was very excited by all the excitement that some of the folks in After Hours had about my idea of doing a birding project. And this afternoon at 2 o'clock Pacific time, which is -8 UTC, we will be having a brainstorming meeting in After Hours, and I hope that any of you who are interested can come. If you have access to Discord, you can look for some information beforehand if you want, and otherwise just show up if you're interested. And it's interested in either being a birder, being a bird expert, or being on the crew, or helping get it all started.
Yeah, that's great. 2 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. Next question.
Our next question is from George E. Kennedy in Washington, D.C. May I give an update on the Aperture P60X bicolor lights?
Go ahead, George.
So I initially mentioned that I got 2 of them at launch, and I know it has been mentioned a couple of times in office hours about it. So that light has got a Bluetooth module issue. So now both of the modules have died. I'm in the process of shipping them back to Aperture today, and they're going to replace them. But I just wanted to save a few of you the pain. If you're going to get that light, just be aware that there's a potential issue with the Bluetooth modules dying, and you don't have control of it. So I'm back on my 9 lights for the next week or so.
Copy. Next question.
Our next question is from Ray Harwood in Avondale, Arizona. If a bunch of the hybrid is best proponents and the everyone back to the office C-suites descended on office hours one day, how do you think the tone of the conversation would change?
Go ahead, Nigel.
I fear I may be one of these evil C-team people that manipulates. What I would say, and I think we've got to be careful to remember, there are lots of different ways of learning, and there are lots of different ways of effectively communicating. And it's invariably in a company, you don't get a one-shot chance to get the message out. You need to do it multiple times in multiple different ways to get it across a company. It can often take a year to get a message through a culture. So my advice to anybody is be clear on your objectives, be clear on the tools you've got, be clear on the audience, and then be flexible to assemble multiple different ways to achieve it.
Go ahead, Rupert.
I think there would be a little bit of acclamation involved there, but I think the conversation would quickly turn to the supply chain shortages, because I think all these people would be running out to buy the right equipment and might find they're having to wait for it.
Go ahead, Sky.
I just want to support Nigel's comment about the C-suite wanting their people to follow and go in a direction, and oftentimes it's for the C-suite's constituents are usually the stockholders. And the challenge is that the people that are making it happen often are the stakeholders. And so this experience here is what I would see at a Microsoft in trying to get people's ideas, attitudes going in a direction. So what is the direction you would want us to go is I think what I'd ask to that question.
I think that Nigel really pointed towards something that we spend a lot of time on, is that I think of things as campaigns, not as I'm going to have a conversation and you're going to now do what I asked you to do. Usually if I'm interacting with a company, a good example is I thought that Salesforce should stream their things. It took me 2.5 years. Like I was doing tons of other production. We're doing green screen and interviews and tons of Intertron, but 2.5 years I kept on telling them, you could stream these. First I got them to record them, just record them. Then I got them to stream them, and now they stream all the time. But it was not something that happened. It was me sending examples. Like, check out this article. Look at this. Look at how this is going. Look at what this looks like. And it's just like, and what I tend to call that is the little hammer. If you ever watch Shawshank Redemption, it's the little hammer. It's not the sledgehammer that you're trying to get through. It's the little jeweler's hammer or jeweler's pick or whatever that you're pulling through. And that's how you want to approach change, is these small little strikes, that each one of them doesn't take very much ground, but they all do over time. And so I think that that's the case. Usually what I point out is that, hybrid events are being largely bandied about by event producers and the event teams because they don't know what else to do. Like that's what we have to remember, is they don't know how to stay relevant. Now, and I don't think that, I think that we're getting pretty close to people are starting to realize that hybrid is not best. It's just, it's a compromise, that the physical teams and the event teams want to stay relevant, and they're trying to figure out how to do something that appears relevant to what's going on. And so they're hanging on to it, but they're a horrible experience. And I think that, and what we see is we don't see people complaining about them. People will say, "Oh, I don't complain." The problem is they're just not coming back, or they're coming back and they're putting the window over in the corner, and then they go back to work and they kind of play it in the background. So the problem that people get into is not what the frontal lobe does; it's what the lower brain does, and that's the thing that kills you. Not what people notice, but how they feel and the behaviors they start to build around your show. And if they build behaviors that they're only half listening to you and they're not really engaged. It is every show you do that creates that more of that behavior makes it harder and harder and harder for you to get out of that hole, and so hybrid events are digging brands into holes that will take them years and millions of dollars to dig themselves back out of. And that's the reality that they have to kind of think about. Next question.
Our next question is from Ray Franklin in Mount Dora, Florida. Over the past 18 months, there has been an explosion of valuable content available from office hours, after hours, YouTube, Discord, and other channels. With many of us returning to location work, how do we choose what to follow?
Go ahead, Noah.
I would encourage you to look at content that serves a longer term purpose, right? So 5 years, 10 years plus, things that can compound or grow with you over time and build you up, whether that's business or finances or mindset kind of stuff. And then secondly is to find content that is actionable, right? You don't want to fall into, and I'm speaking from personal experience of watching something and then watching the next thing and watching the next thing. You want to apply the things that you've learned because that's the best way that you're going to learn from that.
Go ahead, Sky.
How do I follow that? Noah, you rock. Anyway, the keyword in that question is choice. And originally it's the right now solution. And I love Noah's perspective of, what is our horizon? Now that we've survived and now that we've thrived, how do we live into a future that we are a part of making happen? So the word is choice. And I'm having to make choices all the time, but it's for a longer vision or version of what my life might be 5 years from now.
So far, we're building something that's somewhat unique in the sense that we have a fairly operative group of people that keeps on getting bigger, that is constantly building knowledge within itself. So as we share what we know back into that knowledge, it is constantly pushing the system into something that is fairly persistent. And people may be gone for a little while, but they come back. You may get to see things but you don't have to learn it all right now. What it means is more of us are learning how to do it so that when you come back and have that question, there's more people to answer the question. After hours gets bigger, office hours gets better, all these things, keep on happening. And the big thing is that to try to keep up with some of this, I try as much as I can to kind of listen to after hours like radio. I come to office hours as often as I can, obviously. But with after hours, I try to play it in the background and I'll be off, but I'll have the speaker open, and as people will find out, every once in a while I'll drop in and just randomly say something, and then disappear again. But for the most part, I try to not do that because I don't want to take away the conversation. I want it to just do what it's going to do. And but I think that it helps me keep track of things and keep up to date with what's going on. So I think that using it, I have to admit, since we launched After Hours, I've probably listened to an hour of NPR, and that used to be like 3 or 4 hours a day of me listening to that. And so I just listen to After Hours now. So I pick up a lot there, and I think that these daily conversations and just listening to this stuff as best you can, also knowing that if you don't get it today, the key is you have a really valuable resource when you need that information. You don't have to accumulate. It's like going to a buffet. You don't have to eat everything in the buffet. You can just eat what you need today, and then come back and know that steak will still be there tomorrow, and those fries still there tomorrow. Jason?
Well, one of the things that I'll add to that, which you guys have covered it really well, but it's finding these little nuggets that you can continue and grow. And as we're ever changing with the way that this path is evolving, the things that we're really having to figure out are a new metric. So the more that you can expose yourself, the more things that you can learn, the better you're going to be when that time comes with your client, whether it's a hybrid or an in-person event or strictly an online. Right. So the more diversity in what you can gather, the better you're going to be.
Next question.
Our next question is from Tony Mobley in Newnan, Georgia. And he says, I am asking for suggestions for managing my iPhone, Filmic Pro and A10 mini setup, as I am I'm having occasional issues. Daily things I need to do to eliminate issues going forward?
Go ahead, David.
I recommend an analog notebook of sorts. Keep track of issues you have. Develop a pre-flight checklist kind of thing, because when there's no electricity, the analog thing is always there. It's always your friend.
Go ahead, Noah.
Definitely the same thought about logging in, and seeing what your processes were before, because if you're like me, you'll forget and then you'll have to reference it to come back to it. I know with ATEMs specifically, I try to keep those as up to date as possible, which is kind of contrary to OS software, which you tend to do a version or two later. I found with Blackmagic software, the most recent up to date is the most stable.
Go ahead, Tony.
So this has been an ongoing issue for the last, I'll say, month.
I'm not really sure what has changed, but I didn't have to touch it at all. It would just, everything just worked. And now over the last month, I'm having to unpower the ATEM. I'm having to reset the iPhone. It's just been over the last month that this is, and I just was wondering, do I just need to just reset everything daily?
If that's what it takes, like before a production, like for a production person, what you do is you just got to figure out what is the magic thing that I have to do to get the thing to work. Like you stop worrying about whether it should work that way or not. I mean, you can keep on looking through that, but you just figure out if there's like a really laborious, like for most shows, if I know that I have to reset something or there's a chance that something goes wrong, I just reset the things that aren't going to break my show, but will increase the stability and just make it part of my, as David said, part of my checklist. Like if I just do this, nothing goes wrong. And if I find a path, we always joke that, you know, production artists are the worst beta testers because they'll just figure out some way to make it work. And it'll be some goofy thing. Like if I flip this and then turn my head sideways and go like this, it'll always work. And at first it feels weird. And then after a while you're like, whew, and then you just go do what you're going to do. And so that's that's how production artists kind of approach things. And so, yeah, you just want to, you don't care why it should work or what it should do. You can give people feedback on it and ask, but what you want to do is just find a solid methodology that produces a solid outcome, you know, and it doesn't matter how hard that is. I mean, within reason, if it means you have to reset everything, then reset it all. It does sound like you probably updated something, the ATEM or an OS or something. Are you using an Apple adapter, the Lightning adapter?
Yes, it's an Apple adapter. Everything is Apple. I've cried too many times with stuff that was not Apple.
I will say that my iPhone 8 no longer works with my ATEM, and I don't know why. And as a production person, I just stopped using it. But I know that it won't show up. It won't show up, and I don't know why. I'm Filmic Pro. Next question.
The next question is from Eddie Scott in Mission Viejo in California. What's the name of the UK source that will ship a Flow 8 to the USA with the appropriate power plug?
Go ahead, Rupert.
So this is andertons.co.uk. A couple of interesting facts, though. They are obviously have a very good online and e-commerce business these days, but I know them as a brick and mortar retailer from way back when. In fact, their location is in my hometown of Guildford in Surrey, and I remember going in here a couple of times and grabbing things to save my bacon. I actually might know some people who know some people, so maybe we can line up a.
It'd be fun to talk to them about them. Right. I think from a business perspective, it'd be fun to find out how they pivoted, because it seems like they pivoted well.
Yeah, absolutely. And before that store, I just showed you that I remember their store before that, which was, you know, much more modest thing, old building, just a whole different kettle of fish. But on the power adapter, I believe they do ship an adapter as a kind of courtesy item, but it is just a standard USB thing. So long as you have I think it's 1 amp or something like that, a capable power supply, it'll work just fine.
I go ahead, Alan, real quick.
Yeah, and the other one is Gear for Music. I know they ship over, and they have them in stock. Nothing to do with them, and they're $11 to ship it, and it'll be there before the new year.
Next question.
The next question is from Jason Panks in Nashville, Tennessee. What are some of the options to live stream via Zoom when the location doesn't have an adequate internet connection?
George?
So if he's active with internet connectivity, so early in the year, I'm already using Ubiquiti at home, so I just got the smaller USG routers with a combo of the Peplink Transit Duo, and I use those two together. The USG has a failover inside built in, so I use the Peplink. So if I lose internet at the facility, it just fails over to the Peplink, and I'm using a Verizon and AT&T card in that.
Go ahead, Rupert.
You're gonna need some kind of internet connection that is usable for something. If you're streaming from Zoom to an external platform like YouTube or whatever, that stream happens from the cloud to YouTube. But if you're hosting that meeting locally, I would have somebody else host the meeting from a stable location and bring your location in as a participant and spotlight or do whatever you're going to do that way, just in case anything happens. Your whole meeting's not going to fall over.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, great answers for both those guys. The other one that I would add is look around and see if there's somebody else nearby, a neighbor, that you could either run a physical cable, 1,000 feet if you have to, or if you can beam it, there's definitely some Wi-Fi options where you could shoot it from even a mile or two away, get in a microwave or things like that. But otherwise, PepWave, PepLink, and then, yeah, as Rupert said, hosting it. I'd host it in the cloud, but that's me. That's my backup. I just let the host is up in the cloud.
Next question.
Our next question is from Tony Mobley in Newnan, Georgia. He says, Liberty White is on Conversations with Tony Mobley tonight. There will be a conversation about children and media. Positive images. Please come and ask your questions.
Go ahead, Tony, real quick.
Very quickly. Liberty has been working on a special project, and this has prompted the conversation tonight. Please come if you have an opportunity to come and ask your questions. I think you'll be happy that you did.
It's 5 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Sky, real quick.
I just, again, also want to support the community and Liberty as she has supported me and Tony has supported me. But also I want to just shout out to the dozens of people that are also supporting Tony and this experience of Conversations, and just amazing witness to what community can do.
Yeah, it keeps getting better. Yeah, really, really well done. Next question.
Our next question is from Kenny Hampton in Greenville, Illinois. Will you explain for those attending how to access the after-hours sessions live? Following the second hour, the event ends, but I have not found indication on how to continue the discussion in after-hours.
Go ahead, Laura.
Okay, you're going to go to officehours.global. At the top, you will see a link that says schedule. You'll see the thing to join office hours, but keep scrolling down. Underneath Sunday, December 26th, there is a box that says, after hours is open when office hours is closed. Click here to register to join after hours.
There you go. It's very hidden. Like, we don't make any, that's part of the deal.
It's behind the fridge.
Exactly. And we do that because it keeps it sane. So you have to dig in a little bit, but there it is. Next question.
Our next question is from Jack B in Phoenix, Arizona. Would it be possible to test drive panel view in after hours? My wife would like to join the educators, but there is a learning curve that's a barrier to entry at 6 a.m. on a Saturday.
Test drive the panel view on after hours.
I think he means opening up a webinar or something so that they can come in and see what that looks like.
It looks, if you join as a panelist, it looks an awful lot like being in after hours. Like that's kind of the, to test drive the panel. She just has to come, she does have to just arrive. It doesn't have to be 6 a.m. It can be any day. But in after hours, if you ping Chad in we have to kind of coordinate it because I need to know what's happening and Chad needs to know what's happening, but we can get her into the panel otherwise. So talk to Chad and we'll figure out a time when I can get her approved, and then you can show it to her. Next question.
Our next question comes from JHB in New York. When using Noise Assist on a MixPre with a 2 or 3 person interview, each on a separate input, can the Noise Assist be put on all inputs, or is it limited to one input only?
Go ahead, Noah.
Basically, it's a license per channel, right? And that you can select either one of the inputs that you have or left or right output. My understanding is you could buy a second license. I'm not sure as far as the processing between the 3, the 6, and the 10, how many you can do on each device, if that makes sense.
Go ahead, Courtney.
I think on the Sound Devices website, they say Noise Assist you can run up to 8 instances of Noise Assist, and you can put it, of course, on either the inputs or the outputs. So if you're 8 is a lot, so I doubt you'll run out of it. Maybe they've changed their licensing since then.
I think it's a bus, or you can put it on a bus or an input or an output. So I think you could put it on a bus to have it run that way. The main thing is it's a processor limitation inside the MixPre. So you can do more on the Scorpio or on the 8 series than you can with the MixPres because of the bus, the processing limitations on the MixPres. Next question.
Our next question comes from TJ Asher in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Watching a video on YouTube, there was a sync issue between the LED lights and the frame rate on the camera, such that there was a dark band scrolling on the video. When you cannot adjust the LED lights, what would be the process to fix the sync issue?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, well, the scrolling bar, whatever you see, is an artifact of the difference between the sample rate of the camera and the frequency of the LEDs being refreshed in the background. The way to fix that would be if your camera has the ability to change shutter angle or to lock the ISO. Frequently, digital cameras, shutter angle comes from the old school of film, where you actually limited the amount of light that reaches the film by changing the angle of the shutter while still running at the same frame rate. And modern digital cameras do that by changing the sample rate, the length of the sample to the sensor. And if it's set on automatic, that sample rate can change depending upon the amount of light that's reaching the lens. So the way to solve that problem is either to go to a fixed aperture, change the aperture and go to a fixed ISO or a fixed sample rate, and change the aperture to control your light level. And if you can't do it that way, then a lot of times if you put a neutral density filter on the camera, that will allow more light, less light to reach the sensor, and it won't try and stop things down by shortening the sample rate, which is usually going to run you into the problem where you're going to see banding and flicker on LEDs in the background.
Go ahead, Noah.
If you're talking about your own footage, right, something that you're editing, one of the tricks that I've used before is you can duplicate the layer, right? So you have 2 layers of the same footage. The top layer you offset by a frame or maybe 2 frames at max. And you set the opacity to 50%. So basically that flickering, that on and off will be offset by those 2 layers. It doesn't work every time, but it does help sometimes.
Yeah, the flickering is exactly as Courtney has outlined. It is a issue with the shutter speed, and usually if you lower your shutter speed, you can have it, especially lower where you really have it are lower quality LED lights like this, not so much the walls. Where the walls, where you're talking about a black line going up, that's a gen lock issue. And so if you lock your cameras, if you can lock your cameras to the screen, you usually will get rid of that. That's a different problem, I think, with the line moving. It's that the frames aren't updating at the same time, and so you have to gen lock your cameras to whatever's generating the video output to the screen. Next question.
The next question is from Douglas Carmichael. I currently have a 6-core 2013 Mac Pro with 32 gigabytes of RAM. Would you wait for the M1 Max Mac Mini to replace it, or purchase a 16-inch M1 Max MacBook Pro now? This system would sit in my studio and not move.
Go ahead, Dennis.
So I would always wait as long as possible before buying a new machine, because of the fact that something better is always going to come along. So the real question is your current machine still performing well enough for you to do what you need to do? And if it isn't, that's the time to buy a new machine.
Go ahead, Tony.
I'm going to go a little different than Dennis. I'm going to say get a regular Mac Mini right now, use that one, and then when what you need comes out, then get that.
Yeah, absolutely. Guy?
That's exactly what I was going to say. Good job, Tony.
I just keep on buying Mac Minis. I'd rather have multiple processors that are all doing their little thing than have one big computer at this point. So the Mac Minis have become so powerful and so fast that I keep on I'm starting to think in terms of, 8 gig or 16 gig, and mostly 16 gig, but just buying them as little chiclets and then adding them up, because each one of them is especially if you're using a 2013, each one of them will be 10 times faster than what you have. Next question.
Our next question is from George Butters in Halifax. Any updates on Zoom's plans to offer live multi-language translations as part of their transcription offerings? This was mentioned in Zoomtopia as a game changer for live translations and not good news for human translators.
Go ahead, Rupert.
I haven't seen any specific news. There are some people trying to follow up on that announcement. It was talked about at Zoomtopia, and some subsequent documentation. Maybe there's a bit of confusion. I think some folks interpreted it that it would be available by the end of the year, but just reading back on what they had released in the documentation said within a year or over the next year. So it's a whole 12-month window right there.
Yeah, I don't know if Zoom's doing itself any favors by making such long projections, because I think it ends up like people just end up waiting. I think Blackmagic had this problem for a long time, which is that they would announce something and we just knew that it would come sometime before the next NAB because they didn't want to answer the question at NAB about why they haven't released something they announced the last NAB. And most companies learn to slowly tighten that up and not say anything until they have something to produce, something to show. But I think that is a challenge. I don't know if you've done a lot of transcription, you'll know that a human is still a lot more effective than a machine, and especially when it becomes sensitive, it's pretty important, or technical. So it really is hard to get the machine to correct for the right words within a technical realm, and so you end up with the computer making up some pretty horrible things. Like we've had the computer say things that, there's nothing wrong with each word, but how they were formatted is something that it should not have said in front of a lot of people. And you end up with tons of drama online. So I think that it's you got to be really careful about that. Now, one thing that has worked relatively well is having the human do the first version and then using the Google tools to translate that version to other ones. It's still going to be off. It's still going to make mistakes. But it works a little bit better than letting it do it all by itself. And we've definitely done a lot of automatic transcription versus personal transcription. And a person linked directly to Zoom, not through the third-party system, but directly into Zoom is the most effective way to make that work. And it works incredibly well, and it's formatted well. You can always tell when it's formatted badly because the computer's doing it. And so anyway, those are things, and you have to pay attention to it because the computer doesn't get the carriage returns correct, which makes it very hard to read. And the key is you have to have somebody who needs to read it for you and tell you whether it's working or not. There's a lot of things designers do to the subtitles and the captions that make it impossible for the person who actually needs to read this and understand what they're looking at. Like they can't follow along. Like for a long time, some of the players would draw from the center out. Like it would draw from the center out. You can't read that. That doesn't work. So those are the kind of things you have to be kind of careful of as well. All right. Well, we made it through another one. We will have the special event. We do strongly believe that special event will be next Wednesday. So stay tuned for that. You may see announcements that come out that are related to it in the next couple days. So I will put that on Twitter, and I'll probably put an announcement out on Discord to let you know that it's happening. But it should be pretty interesting. Next week should be a lot of fun. And remember that, tomorrow the Belfast Method team is going to be talking about remote takeovers, so it should be a lot of fun. And now we're going to jump into After Hours. And remember, Tony Mobley, 5 o'clock Pacific Standard Time.
Thanks, Alex.
And
Thanks, everybody.
Birds at 2.
Birds at 2.